We're starting off with this topic on page number 74. This has to do with the values in research process. If you have a look at this topic says how research findings may be biased by the actions and values of the sociologists and by choices made in designing and conducting the research. Now, we're about to get started with the topic that has to do with the values that are there in a sociological research. To start off with, when we refer to these values, we are talking about the extent to which a research can be biased. Let me put a question over here, a simple question, and that question would help us take this further in an easier manner. For instance, if I say, is it possible or even desirable to conduct a value free sociological research? We're talking about the possibility and desirability. The possibility and the, oh, that didn't work. I'll have to use another color here. We're talking about the possibility and desirability of a research being value free. Now, when we talk about sociological values being there in when we talk about a sociologist's values being there in a research, what sort of impact do they have, or what is the significance of these values? Do you know what? Before this, the topic we discussed was or had to do with the possibility and desirability of using natural science methods in a sociological research. When we talk about using natural science methods in a sociological research, ever wondered why would want to use natural science methods? For instance, do you know what? If someone wants to use natural science methods, that in other words means, according to them, there's something good or something nice about natural science methods that should be adopted, right? The general understanding that we hold about natural sciences is that they are that they are free from values. Now, for instance, a very simple example over here, if we talk about the law of gravity, if you have anything in front of you, you let go of it, it is going to come down, right? That's the law of gravity, 9.8 meter per second square. The question is, if it's something that you have as a student, I mean, if you let go of it, it is going to come down. Does that mean if I, as a teacher, if I let go of this wouldn't come down? No, it wouldn't really work like this. आपके पास साइंस के अंदर प्रॉपर स्टैब्लिश मेथड्स होते हैं, लॉज होते हैं, जिसके अंदर दे से वैल्यूज की गुंजाइश नहीं होती. तो सवाल ये है कि अगर कोई बात करता है अबाउट नेचुरल साइंस मेथड्स बीइंग यूज, it's probably because they think natural science methods are more free from values, or they're value free as compared to the non-scientific methods. Now, keep this basic example, keep this basic thing in your mind. Remember, we are talking about the possibility and desirability of a value free sociological research. The possibility and desirability. And I'm sure everyone sitting over here knows what the word possibility means and what the word desirability means over here. Sociological knowledge differs from other forms of knowledge, from journalism through personal experience to everyday experience, through personal experience to everyday conversation and thinking, because it deals with fact. When we talk about sociological knowledge, the general idea is we tend to use sociological knowledge because sociological knowledge isn't really based on personal opinions, right? If there is a theory, that theory would probably have a backing to it, right? To establish sociological knowledge, data is collected and then analyzed or tested objectively, right? If you want to establish sociological knowledge, like I said, if you're talking about a sociological theory ke liye bhi, it the data would have to be collected, and then the data would have to be analyzed, the data would have to be tested, and it would have to be tested in an objective manner, so that whatever you come up with, whatever the end findings are, they have credibility, so that no one just considers them as another opinion. So in other words, the data collected and presented is value free. It has not been influenced by the values, beliefs, or prejudices of the researcher, right? Ideally, what we're talking about is the data collection method, the way you're analyzing data, the way you're testing your hypothesis, or the way you are testing whatever it is that you're wanting to test. You try to, as a sociologist, you're expected to keep it as value free as possible, right? Without your personal values being involved into it, without your beliefs, your prejudices being involved into it. More correctly, value free should be, instead of using the word value free, we should use the term value neutral, since it is not possible to truly act without values. Now, that's a very strong statement and an interesting one. Why is it that we say that it is not possible for someone to truly act without values? You know what? When we talk about, let me give you a very simple example over here. Even if you're talking about conducting a research, number one, we'd have to choose a topic, right? And when we're choosing a topic, don't you think while choosing a topic, your values would automatically be a part of your research, or I mean, your values play a very important role when it comes to topic selection as well. I would choose a topic because I think it's important. You choose another topic because you probably think the topic you've chosen is more important. So, when I'm choosing the topic that I think is important, don't you think that is reflecting my values? It is, right? So, we are using the term, what we're talking about over here is, instead of using the term value free, we should use the term value neutral, right? Likewise, it's not only, it doesn't really end here. Even when we speak about conducting a research, right? If we're speaking about conducting a research, there we have numerous amount of options. We can, I mean, me as a researcher, I could choose questionnaires as a research method to collect data, right? If I'm choosing questionnaires to collect data, that's probably because questionnaires suit me well. That's probably because I think questionnaires, or using questionnaires, would be a better option for my research. And when I think using questionnaires as a method through which I should conduct research is better, don't you think that is again reflecting my values? It doesn't even end there. There's more to it. You know what? If I finally decided that I should conduct my research through questionnaires, I'd have a long list of questions that I'd have in my mind. Not every question that I have on my mind, I'd put it in that questionnaire. I'd have to be very selective about the questions that I think I should have on my questionnaire. And when I'm selecting a few questions out of many questions, that again is reflecting my values. Is it or is it not?
Yes, sir.
It is,
Is it?
sir. Yes.
It is, right? So we're using the term value neutral since it is not possible to truly act without values. So the best we can do is recognize the various points at which values potentially intrude into research process, and then adjust our research strategy to limit or cancel their effect. Right now that we have come to a point where we know it might not be very easy for us to act without values, we might as well be smart enough to identify the points, or to recognize the points at which we think values can potentially intrude into our research process. And then accordingly we can, I mean, then we can adjust our research strategy to see that it doesn't really have a huge effect on a research, right? So it is possible to outline a range of points at which value potentially intrude in the research process. To carry out a research, now this is what I was talking about. To carry out a research, sociologists have to make certain practical choices. For instance, researchers must choose a topic, and decisions about who or what to study are influenced by your personal values. Like I said, I'd probably conduct a research on something I think is important, right? And it's not very simple. It's not as simple as it initially looks like. It was, I very conveniently wrote this down: is it possible or even desirable to conduct a value free sociological research? But if you have a look at it, it is way more complex than it apparently looks like. You know what? If I chose to conduct a research on a particular issue, what if my funding agency does not allow me to? In that case, the values of that funding agency would matter, right? What if I want to conduct a research on a powerful group? That powerful group isn't really allowing me to conduct a research on them, or I do not really have access to that powerful group. Even in that case, don't you think values would step in? Right, researchers must choose a topic, and decisions about who or what to study are influenced by their personal values and what they consider to be important. These values will also decide whether a researcher studies the activities of a powerful group or a relatively powerless group. Now when we talk about studying the activities of a powerful group, we have this reference over here. We have this research as in Pierce research study of corporate criminality in the chemical industry or the relatively powerless. Right now, this, if you're talking about conducting a research on powerful people, it might not be easy for you. Doesn't this remind us of Marxism? Right, in addition, these choices are influenced by personal views about danger and difficulty. Right, I might be inclined towards the topic, but then if I have given a second thought, I might realize, oh, this is not as easy as it looked like, and I might simply walk out. I might simply choose another topic. For example, powerful people tend to value their privacy, so gaining access to the world may not be easy. Things might be difficult. Do we all understand
Yes,
this?
sir. Yes, sir.
जी सर.
Likewise, topic choice is also influenced by funding considerations. Funding considerations play a very important role over here as well. Your funding agency wouldn't want something to be looked into that eventually goes against them. That's pretty simple, pretty common sensual. अगर कोई एजेंसी आपको फंड कर रही है, अगर कोई गवर्नमेंट आपको फंड कर रही है, कोई यूनिवर्सिटी आपको फंड कर रही है, कोई ऑर्गेनाइजेशन आपको फंड कर रही है, इवेंचुअली अगर आपके रिजल्ट्स उनको लगता है उनके खिलाफ जाएंगे, दे वुड नॉट be ready to give you money, and that's pretty understandable and acceptable. Yeah, those paying
Yes, sir.
for the research may not only influence what is studied but also how it is studied. Right, for instance, you have stepped into it, they might still keep on giving you directions. Doesn't all of this have to do with values? All of this doesn't all of this I mean, there's a possibility that all of this might reflect in our research eventually. All of this might eventually make our research biased. Right, now this situation raises ethical questions about whether a researcher should be held responsible for the purpose to which their research is put. That is another interesting point. A researcher simply collects data, presents it, publishes it, right? And if when after researcher is done with his job, do you think it makes sense to hold the researcher responsible कि उसके काम को किस पर्पस के लिए यूज किया जा रहा है? That's again questionable, right? Like I said, it's not as simple as it looked like. It's not as it is complex. Right, decisions about the methods of research used are also influenced by values. This is again something that we had spoken about. Decisions about the method of research. Now if I am a positivist, I'd be more inclined towards using quantitative data. If I am an interpretivist, I'd be more inclined towards using qualitative data. Right, do we all get this?
जी
Yes,
सर.
sir.
Yeah. So, decisions about the methods of research used are also influenced by values because they inform a researcher's beliefs about how best to achieve reliability and validity. Of course, if you are a positivist, you would have your own view about reliability and validity. Likewise, if you're an interpretivist, you would have your own views about validity and reliability that you would want to take care of. Right, as we have seen, different sociologists have different ideas about the respective value of quantitative and qualitative data, where questions are asked of a respondent, judgments are made about who to question, what to ask, how the person is permitted to respond. Now all of this reflects your values. Who to ask questions, this is you as a researcher, you making decisions, you deciding as to who should be asked questions, and that again is reflecting your values. उसी तरीके से what sort of questions should be asked, this again is reflecting your values. How the person is permitted to respond. For instance, if I talk about using pre-coded questions, if we're talking about using close-ended questions, these close-ended questions limit the options for you. We all know this, right? Multiple choice questions, you aren't really giving the respondent an option to respond the way he or she wants to respond, in contrast to an open ended question, which might show a very different picture, very different story. What if you are trying to gather data through close ended questions? The amount of options that you have provided, that you've given, they do not even fit in to what the respondent thinks. In that case, don't you think इसके अंदर आपका पावर काउंट कर रहा है? इसके अंदर आपका पावर काउंट कर रहा है तो आपकी वैल्यूज काउंट कर रही हैं. Get it?
Yes,
Positivists
sir.
prefer Positivists may prefer to limit respondents' choice by giving them a list of answers from which to choose, perhaps close questions where the answers are easy to quantify. However, on the other hand, if you are an interpretivist, you may encourage a respondent to answer in their own words by asking open ended questions. Values also involved. Now, you see, there are so many different ways, there are so many different arenas through which we can कंक्लूड कि हमारी वैल्यूज इन्वॉल्व हो सकती हैं, हमारी वैल्यूज इंक्लूड कर सकती हैं हमारी रिसर्च प्रोसेस को. ठीक है. वैल्यूज ऑल्सो इन्फ्लुएंस डाटा एनालिसिस. द रिसर्चर मस्ट मेक डिसीजंस अबाउट व्हाट डाटा टू इंक्लूड and what to exclude from the completed research. Even when your research is conducted, even when you're done with whatever had to be done, you wouldn't just simply publish anything and everything. And we had discussed this in the last class as well. There are certain factors where I'd show that to you. I'd show that to you again. Now, see, is it true? We had spoken about this. Is it true? Number two, is it fair? Number three, is it wise? I had explained all of this to you in the last class. Now, moving on. Values also influence data analysis. Like I said, the researcher must make decisions about what data to include and what to exclude from the completed research. You know, the research paper doesn't have everything you have found out. There are so many things that researchers choose not to bring in front of public. Right now, researchers need to be funded. We have spoken about this funding point earlier, a couple of minutes back as well. This may involve a researcher getting approval from a project from a university or other institution they work for, or it may involve applying for funding from another institution. In the UK, for example, much research in the sociology and other social sciences is funded by the Economic and Social Research Council. To be successful in an application, the researcher will have to convince the funding body that the research is worthwhile. You know what? They wouldn't invest in your research, or they wouldn't be ready to fund your research if they are not convinced that your research is worthwhile. I mean, you can't just carry a only what I can think of right now is stupid. You can't just carry a stupid idea to a funding agency and expect them to fund for your research. You'd have to convince them that the work you're trying to do is worthwhile. This is likely to mean that the proposed research fits in with the priorities of the funding body at that time. For instance, the institution, the organization, the government department that is there to fund you, that is a potential funding agency for you, they'd have their own priorities. If your research work is not fitting into their priorities, the priorities that they have at a particular time, they might not be ready to fund you. Projects with a clear practical outcome are more likely to be funded. Other proposals may never be successful. Where governments directly or indirectly control the funding bodies, research that may prove embarrassing or inconvenient to the government or may suggest that its policies are wrong is unlikely to be funded. Now, we spoke about values intruding into our research process through so many different dimensions, through so many different arenas, through so many different points. So this was a tiny little explanation to this topic from your book, and I hope this helped.